Hi, I'm Kedar. In this video, we are going to understand about render setup in Maya 2017. The way render layers work in Maya 2017 is different than older versions. In newer version, we create render layers, then add collections, then add object settings to the collections. Let's open Maya and see. Here we don't find the render layers tab like in older versions. But we can go back to the old way of creating render layers by going into preferences. Here rendering, and here we have option called legacy render layers, so we can select that and say OK. And if we save, then we need to restart the Maya and we get the same old render setup in Maya 2017 as well. So let's stay back with the current setup. Here we can change the path to save the render setup templates in 2017. Before working in Maya, let's understand few other things. In the old method of creating render layers, if you see here, we used to create render layers and add the objects into them. So as an example, we have a scene with car, building 1, 2 poles and ground groups which has different objects in it. So as per the old method, to create render layer, we created RL car, render layer car, and add all car objects into it. Similarly, add building in building objects in RL, which is render layer building. To add any object settings to any object in a render layer, then we need to do it based on object. But in the new method, it is very flexible and easy to reuse. Current method is based on collections. So we can create different collections based on our requirements per sequence, and we can save all of them. And those can be reused in different shots without recreating anything. Here I have created a collection car tire which has all the tires. Similarly, collection of car body and windshield, etc. Here also we have render layers called RL underscore car, but instead of adding objects into render layer, we created different collections and we added in it. So if you can see in RL car, we have collection car tire, we have collection car body, all those added into layer. We can add object settings to collections instead of objects. Once we create different layers and collections, then we can actually save all these things and we can reuse throughout our sequence. Actually, we can save project based templates as well, and we can use in different shots and sequences. We can save different collections with objects, different collections without objects, different collections with overrides, render layers separately, and everything at once, and we can reuse in other shots as well. Now let's move to Maya and see how to create render layers. Here this button opens up render settings, and the UI of render settings is very flexible. You can actually attach, detach. This can be detachable, and you can attach again the properties. With this button we can create render layers, and we can rename them. Here I have renamed it as car. We can create several render layers and rename them. Let's open a scene file to understand more. In this scene file we have different objects here, car, buildings and poles. Let's create render layers with these objects. So here we create a layer and rename it. We can create several layers like this, but in order to add the objects in render layers we need collections. Let's create a collection from here. Create collection, rename the collection as collection car, in which we are going to add car. So select the car, and we have different filters here. So at this moment we are using transform filter, and let's add. So it will add car. Let's create another collection for building, and we can select the building and add into this collection. This I button is to see the layer. So if I select this render layer, you can see there are two objects, and in master layer we have all the objects, and in the second layer we don't have anything. Let's create another collection for the other building. This time we'll create a shape type based collection. Go to shape and select shape node and add. Now if you see in transform filter it is not highlighted, but in shape filter it is highlighted. That means that means it's a shape based collection. The other two are transform based collections. You can see the difference there, icon. And let's select, yeah, this button is for batch render. If that is switched on, then this layer will render in batch. And now you can actually prune with this option, the last button. You can prune the collection, and this is isolate. You can actually isolate any collection in any layer. Let's delete all these layers, and let's create another one. Now I want to render ground here with the shadow of the car. Let's create a render layer and create a collection, different collections, one for car, one for ground. And I want the car to be trace and ground to be visible in camera. So similarly let's add the car. Go to shape, add it, so that it's now shape based collection. Let's create another collection for ground. Let's add all of these objects required for ground. Yeah, let's add shape. Now it's done. Now to add, yeah, it's done. Now to add object settings for the car, we want primary visibility off for this one, and let's select a shape node, and in render stats right click and absolute override. So if we do primary visibility as a absolute override, we can switch off from here, and let's render. Here you see the car is also rendering. That's because this one is not refreshed. You see this red mark here, so let's click again. So now it's refreshed. Now let's see. Yeah, now you can see that car is tracing, and we are able to render only shadows here. So this button, if it shows up red mark, red outline, then it's not refreshed properly. Then you need to click here again and to refresh it. Here we created a collection based on the objects, and we can actually create collections based on wildcards as well. So let's refresh this and create a new collection. So here we can add shape based collection, and here we can write star car star. That means it's a wildcard. Wherever you find car, it will add up. So this is useful in a lot of scenarios. Now you can see this car is added. Create another collection here for say ground. We have a plane. We can add the object as a shape node, star plane star. It will add up the plane. So this is a wildcard. We can add several objects like this by giving comma and star name star. Now we created collections based on wildcards, so everything else is same. We can add overrides and adjust, but the main purpose of wildcard is we can actually save all these things, and we can reuse in other shots. Even if the prefix or suffix changes with the object name, but still we can reuse them and it will still work. Similarly, we can override render settings as well per layer basis. So we can drag and drop this render setting on our render layer. So it will create overrides, and this is to switch on and off the overrides. If you double click on this one, you get the render settings tab here. Whatever render settings you want to override, you can right click and say absolute override. It will add up in your render layer, and you can adjust them. And once you adjust, if you refresh that layer, yeah, so now you can see the settings there. So this is layer based settings. So in globals you have all settings, and in render layers you have proper settings. Similarly, you can add or edit any override per layer based. Similarly, you can edit lights as well. Drag and drop, you get settings of lights here. If you double click, now you can edit anything here, so it will automatically create override, and you can edit visibility settings and other settings of light as well. And like lights and render globals, you can actually add overrides based on materials and shaders like this. You can add, and we looked at absolute override. So similarly, there is another option called relative override. Relative override is a override which takes up the current value and it offsets it. Uh, to understand this, let's create a new render layer and create a collection of car and add it into our collection. And if you see, if we want to transform this object as per in our render layer, then we have this relative override. Click this. Now if you see here, we have uh, multiplier and offset. So if the multiplier is 1 and if I say offset of some value, then you see it's the same value there. But if the current value is different, then it offsets with the current plus offset. So this is how relative override works. Till now we understood about how to create collections, how to create render layers, how to add objects into collections and edit object settings. Now let's understand how we can save all of these and reuse them. So we can create a render layer here and we create collections. Let's add collections with wildcards so that even if the name changes in any other shot, then it will work directly without any editing. So let's create few other collections. Once I create all these collections, I can save these collections and I can reuse them in my other render layer and add object settings to the collections. So let's create the collections here. Add the objects into our collections. These collections can be saved using JSON file. So now it is created. Now export this. So give it a name. So similarly we can export all the collections, and if you see, these selections are exported as JSON files and at this path. So we exported all three collections created. Now let's create another render layer and let's call those same collections. So if you see, it's that simple, calling the same. All the collections from the above we saved and we called them in this layer. So if you see, we can add our object settings. There are two different layers, same collections, and the object settings are different for different layers. In car layer, we have primary visibility on for the car and off for the other objects. Similarly, for the other layer, building on and other objects are off. Now if you see, the object settings are different. The imported collections are in italic and we need to accept it to work. So now if you see, these are not italic, and you can actually save with the object settings. Now this layer, this collection has object settings in it and I have saved it. And if we create a new render layer, and we can import the same collection with object settings. Now you see, we have the same object settings as we saved, and similarly same thing, we need to accept it. As we discussed earlier, we can save all of these render layers along with collections and object settings, and we can use in other shots as well. So let's delete all of these and let's see how it works. So it works directly. See, all the settings and everything is there now. So we used uh, star wildcard. So even if we change the name of the car and we import all the settings, then it will directly work. So if I select yes, this is working now because we have wildcard here. This is the benefit of collections. Now I accept, so it's done. Similarly, we can save render settings as well. Let's add render settings to our layer and edit them. And once we edit these things, we can export it and we can use in other shots as well. We can use these saved settings to the other layer. Same settings, and we need to just say accept. And even with the render settings also we can save all of these. We can export and we can use in any other scene, any other shot of a sequence. These settings and collections are saved in this particular path. This path can be changed through preferences, render settings. So this is the path. We can change this and we can save all the templates of collections, attributes, everything. And this is a JSON file. This is how it looks, and this saves all the filters and patterns as well. We can edit JSON file here as well, or else we can edit in Maya and we can resave or overwrite any collection or any setting. So if you see, this is a big one in which we have different collections and patterns. Let's try editing JSON file, and see here we add two car, so it's a different object. And if we load that same collection in our Maya scene file, it won't work. So let's add it. Now if you see, let's go to this selection, there is no car because the name has changed. Similarly, you can save, you can edit the name here and save, or else go to JSON file and edit it, and now it will work. See, it's working now. So it's same as star car star with any prefix or suffix. As we already discussed, we can create material based overrides as well. So it's same as like right click, add, yeah, add override. So similarly we can edit everything. Hope everything related to render setup in Maya 2017 is clear. We can create render layers, collections, overrides. We can save all of them separately and together as well, and we can use in our shots in one sequence. With wildcards it's very easy to create and save, and with the new render setup in Maya 2017 it's very easy to create templates sequence specific and use same thing in all of the shots. Hope this video is useful. Thanks for watching.